Welcome to the final training camp edition of Dolphins In Depth, a podcast brought to you by the Miami Herald. I am your host, Miami Dolphins columnist Omar Kelly, and joining me today for the very first time is a three-man panel of all Miami Herald staffers. Barry Jackson, the illustrious Barry Jackson of Miami Herald fame, and new Dolphins beat writer Isaiah Smalls, like Biggie Smalls. Isaiah's got way too many names. I'm going to have him simplify it on these social media streets for people so they can find his good work. Isaiah is here with me in Tampa. We have watched the joint practices with the Buccaneers, which I thought was a very pleasant experience, Barry. While we saw a lot of fights in the previous joint practices, this was a very peaceful experience. I think everybody at training camp, I correlated it to like a fighter in the 11th round, two punch-drunk fighters in the 11th round. They're just holding on to each other, trying to make it into the final round. Like nobody had any energy for fisticuffs. A very spirited action, Barry. Before we began, however, Mike McDaniel addressed the thumb gate with Tyreek Hill, basically saying, "Yeah, I beat him up in thumb war," which we all know is a Mike McDaniel joke. Tyreek did not have the thumb bandage on today during practice. Did he catch any passes, Isaiah?
Zero. Not one pass.
Did he have any thrown to him?
Zero. He had nothing. He did nothing when it came to the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah. So Isaiah had to watch. This is how joint practices work are basically you split the teams on two fields. Your first team offense versus their first team defense, their first team defense versus first team offense. And media members, we have to pick because you can't have both. I had the good fortune of watching the Dolphins first team defense. Oh, it was some good stuff. Can't say I was really impressed with Baker Mayfield, but we'll get into that later because we know what everybody wants, Barry. And what is that? They want to know how Tua did.
Oh, of course. Well, it didn't begin well from your guys' account with an interception initially. But from that point, there were several completions for chunk yards, right, Isaiah? What struck you about how the offense looked today and how Tua looked?
On the Tua front, for me, it was the ball placement. I think that's the thing that really stood out. You know, he's always been one of those guys that kind of throws his receivers open. And I thought that was on full display today, especially with how beat up the receiving room is. You know, no OBJ, no Tyreek, no Waddle. So, you know, he's kind of throwing for lack of a better words, me and you out there, right? But
oh wow, that's disrespectful.
It was a joke. Calm down, guys. But that said, he made some great throws today. Outside of that first throw that you mentioned, and then outside of that, it was Ezukanma. Like I was very, very impressed. You know, even though Omar is not a fan of one-on-ones, I think the one route that I saw from him on the one-on-ones was a nice go route, and he beat the defender, by far, right? And after that, he had a nice post route that Tua hit him on, a nice comeback. You know, to me, he was balling, especially considering, you know, he's on one of those people that's kind of on the fringe of the roster, and I think he put up a great showing today, personally. So.
And one bit of good news also, I know you had noted that he limped off today. He tweeted a few hours later, blessed, which would suggest that he's okay. And to me, his stock has increased more than anyone on this team over the last week. If you combine the 5 catches for 65 yards against Washington on Friday, the great run in that game where he made something out of nothing, follow that up with a couple of good practices. He's on the team, guys, right? Would you put him on the team, Omar?
I put him on the team before Malik Washington. Everybody thought I was crazy.
There's too much talent to give up on. You have to invest another year in the talent, and I think he's going to be able to help you this year. So that's one encouraging thing offensively we saw. Defensively, I saw, Omar, you mentioned Calais had a very good practice. Sealer, who has been great all of camp. But Ethan Bonner was beaten on a long pass today as he gets back into action after missing some time with the concussion symptoms, right?
Yeah, it wasn't just Ethan. It was Jordan. It was Kendall Fuller as well. They had Baker Mayfield. He reminded me a lot of Joe Flacco, where it was either check downs or big play. He did pass a couple of times to the tight end in the middle of the seam. I wasn't very impressed with what I saw from Baker Mayfield, but then again, he's Baker Mayfield. No disrespect. But I also wasn't impressed with what I saw from the defense. And outside of the chunk plays, yes, Jalen Ramsey wasn't working. Yes, they were rotating a lot of guys in. Yes, they don't have a lot of defenders. But I walked away from that practice a little bit more concerned about the defense than I have been most of training camp. No Benito Jones. I saw Benito Jones today, and I don't know where he's been, but he looks about 400 pounds, which I don't know what happened. Like, he looked like he ate a human. And it makes me wonder and worry, especially with the release of Tier Tart. Is Brandon Peely really ready for a 53 spot? And I'm just not there yet. And then, okay, if I'm not there yet, am I going to be playing Calais Campbell as my nose? Am I going to be playing
Jonathan Harris?
Jonathan Harris?
Some snaps there.
Or am I just not going to use a
worrisome? Yeah.
Am I just not going to use a 3-4 front at all? Or are they going to be relying on some team cutting a nose tackle and then you adding him to the roster? I feel a little bit, as Joe Philbin would say, Barry, queasy about the situation. Then I also watched, and maybe this is just an over concern on my end, but I watched David Long in coverage, and I know David's battling a couple of injuries. I know what he is in the run game, but man, that pass coverage, woo! If I'm a defense, if I'm on offense, I'm just going to target him in the passing game. There's certain players that I'm going to go after, and I have to create a game plan to go after David Long in the passing game.
Yeah, so last year, if you believe the Pro Football Focus metrics, and I think in pass coverage, their numbers are reliable, he was one of the worst inside linebackers in the league last year, pass coverage. 42 completions in 53 targets, 509 yards allowed by David Long in pass coverage. That's 113 passer rating against. He was the best inside linebacker, arguably against the run in the league. Pro Football Focus said he was one of the worst against the pass. And you sort of have to accept that with David Long because you're getting elite run defense. But I had seen some progress from David Long in coverage earlier this camp. But as you said today, and of course I was not there, but as you noted today, it was definitely an issue. I just think you have to swallow your medicine that is going to be a shortcoming with David Long. Hopefully he can improve it. What's troubling, as you noted in one of your pieces on MiamiHerald.com, Omar, is Anthony Walker's continued absence. This mysterious ailment. He's missed more than 3 weeks. Now you have to ask yourselves, does he even make the team? Do they cut him initially and then try to re-sign him? Do they put him on IR? And just to remind our listeners, with the IR rules, for the first time, you can put two guys on IR after you set your 53. All this has to be done next Tuesday and have them return next season. In the past, every player who was eligible to come off IR had to be on your initial 53. That's no longer the case according to the league. Now two guys can be put on next Tuesday and return. So the question is, who are those guys? Maybe Craycraft, could be Anthony Walker, could be Benito Jones. We shall see. With Walker, I guess that leaves Duke Riley as your number 3 inside linebacker. And again, you're just going to have to deal with David Long's pass deficiencies. How about a corner? I want to get more to Isaiah with offense in a minute. But one other thing on corner, Omar, obviously no Jalen Ramsey today, so you can't draw any broad brush conclusions on the state of the secondary overall. But did Bonner's play concern you today, knowing that Cam Smith's going to be out a while? Are you comfortable with what you have as your top boundary beyond Cater Coe, who sort of is a combo boundary nickel?
I would excuse, even though I put Ethan Bonner in my stock down for the day, I will excuse his play because that's the first day back. He's had concussion-like symptoms. He was on his knee a lot, so clearly he was winded. These things happen. Guys don't have bad days consistently, and I think Ethan is a kind of player that's going to rebound from that. We saw Cam Smith. He was wearing a compression sleeve and wore one of those bands. I don't even remember what they're called, where you're basically working out your hamstring or your growing area. And I am at the point where I believe Cam Smith, based on the little that I saw, is the number 3 guy, if he's healthy. Ethan, I think, is going to be a core special teamer, as is Cam Smith. I'm not worried about Ethan. I'm not worried about Cam. If Nick is on the roster, then you could put Nick at nickel, and then you could put Cater on the outside. I'm not too worried about that. I'm more worried about the safety spot, to be honest with you, because Jordan Poyer's there. He's playing with that thumb issue. I have questions and concerns about Jordan's range. And then you've got Javon Holland, and we have no idea what that's about. So, and then Elijah Campbell is in the number 3. I'm not even sure if Marcus Maye makes the 53-man roster at this point. We'll see next week.
Right. I would think Maye would make it for the reasons we talked about. You need his veteran reliability, his smarts, his experience, especially with Poyer beat up and especially with Holland now out with this mystery ailment. Isaiah, I wanted your thoughts on tight end. We saw Tanner Connor back today. He was good early in camp, and he returned now. But the question is, do you keep him? Do you keep Jody Fortson as a 4th? You're obviously solid with your top 3 with Durham Smythe and Jonnu Smith and Julian Hill. What do you think of the tight ends today?
Okay, so I have 2 things that really stood out, both in one-on-ones. Again, I know Omar's not a fan, but what I saw from Hill and Fortson, they both had 2 real just mosses over the defenders today in one-on-ones that for me just stood out as like they were just little boying these guys. Like it wasn't even close. And so for me, I mean, you think about that, those 2 spots. For me, I think if I'm going to rank them, I'm going to put Hill, Fortson, and then and Connor. But Tanner, excuse me. And so that's my thing. That was my thing. I didn't really see much from Tanner when he came to one-on-ones, which you would think would be an opportunity for him to really shine, right? Didn't really see that from him. So I think those 2 guys are, are ahead of him in the race. And then also, I forgot to mention this earlier, but Jonnu had a another good day today. Definitely liking what I've been seeing from him. They're very, very creative with the way that they're using him, and especially with no OBJ, as I wrote about earlier this, I think last week. He's going to have to play a very, very big role on this offense.
Yeah, I love the chemistry that's developed, Isaiah, between Tua and Jonnu Smith. That, to me, guys, is one of the best things that happened in this camp. We know that McDaniel's going to use him creatively. It's funny because Jonnu Smith had run the ball only twice in the last 2 years. He had a bunch of carries early in his career. Before the last 2 years, just twice. We saw him reach 2 carries in the first few days of training camp, and those carries have generally yielded chunk plays. There was one exception, a Washington practice last Thursday where the Commanders bottled it up, but in the game, he obviously had a good run on Saturday, and he was productive as a runner for the most part throughout camp. So that excites me. What else excites you, Omar? Now the training camp, I guess you could say it's over. There are no more practices that are open to media, no more open to fans. What else do you emerge from after these 17, 18 practices that makes your toes tingle, to quote the late, great Jim Mandich?
You know what? I have learned that this is my 16, 17 training camp. I don't even know. But this, I would say, has been the only time that I've ever said or came into situations where I might have counted guys out, and then they got themselves off the mat before the referee, does the 1, 2, 3, and they put up that arm and said, I'm not going down. Channing Tindall, he's got life in him. He's fighting. He's fighting every day. Erik Ezukanma is probably the greatest example of this. We walked into camp this year, and we basically said, hey, only one spot available. Who wants it? Everybody's giving it to the rookie. Erik Ezukanma was counted out, gets injured, gets forgotten about, comes back, and is dominant. And here's Ezukanma talking about the challenges of keeping your confidence high when you're in these situations.
It's night and day. Being able to just listen and hear the plays over and over again, it just gets easier and easier to know the concepts, know what the offense is supposed to do, and what we're trying to attack.
Erik, could you just kind of put into words of what this upcoming week means for guys that are trying to make this roster, just how important it is?
It's really important. Being out, it was tough, but coming back and being able to wrap my arms around the younger guys and listen to the vets and just knowing that when the cuts happen, some guys you won't see again. So it's like it's just taking every opportunity and taking all the moments in.
How much of a relief was it to perform the way that you did against Washington?
What was the question?
How much of a relief was it to perform the way you did against Washington?
A big relief, honestly. Man, it's like just waiting since week 2 of last year against the Patriots, you know, that being my last game, just kind of having self-doubt sometimes and being able to go back in and make plays early. It was a good feeling to know that, you know, you kind of still got it. So
How did you overcome the self-doubt, or are you still battling with it?
you know, you're always battling with that voice in the back of your head, but at the end of the day, it's you know, your teammates, you know, they believe in you, your coaches believe in you, and when you know they believe in you and they talk highly of you, you know, that only just gives you confidence. And when the quarterback is looking your way, knowing that you're getting it one-on-one and you got to win, it's either you or him, and that's the name of the game.
Yeah. I just wanted to point out 2 things because I really like that little his quotes there, right? 2 things really stood out. The first, you got to give him props for, you know, battling that self-doubt, right? Because obviously, you know, after the neck injury last year and then getting injured earlier in camp, like he could very well have thrown his hands up and been like, look, this might not be for me, right? So shout out him for coming back overcoming that, excuse me. But on the flip side of that, I think the other thing that stood out was the comfortability he seems to have with this McDaniel offense, right? I know they talked about it earlier in the week, the coaches did, about you know, the new wrinkles they're trying to add, right? And so, as you know, if you're a new guy coming in like Malik Washington, it might be a lot for you to, you know, do all this stuff, right? But now, you know, I think that's kind of what has given Eazy-E the edge, right? Like he's been in this offense for 3 years. The new wrinkles for him are just, okay, cool, I know where I'm supposed to be, but now I also know where that guy's supposed to be, that guy's supposed to be, that guy's supposed to be, and that's gonna, you know, help you when it comes to doing your job, right? So, you know, shout out to him. You know, hopefully he'll be able to make that roster.
Yeah, good point, Isaiah. And the thing that's always held Ezukanma back beyond obviously the neck issue that sidelined him most of last season is Wes Welker saying that he needs to have a better command of the playbook. That hurt him in year 1. It limited him to only 1 game, the season finale against the Jets. But he needs to know it now. He needs to know it backward and forward. If he doesn't, then that would speak poorly on him. So credit him for studying. I asked Welker earlier in camp, does he know the playbook well enough to your liking? He didn't answer directly, which is unlike Wes. So I do wonder if there were questions earlier, but the way he's been playing would suggest that he has a better command of it now. So to me, the receivers are clear-cut. Tyreek, who we think is going to be fine with the thumb, even though it bears monitoring. Jalen Waddle, who was back today, didn't do team drills, but did do individual drills. He said it was a minor injury. I know he told you guys that he could have played through it had it been a regular season thing the last couple of weeks. Obviously, Berrios is your number 3 without Odell. If Odell's back, Odell's your number 3. Berrios probably your number 4. And then Ezukanma, and then Malik Washington as a rookie is not going to be cut. At least it would surprise me. So to me, your receiver room is clear cut. If Odell is not ready to come up PUP for the start of the season, maybe add 1 more. You probably would need 1 more, but I'm still hopeful we'll see Odell in the next week or so. And so is my reading of receiver right, or would you add something, you guys, to this?
I think I'm focused on my practice squad, figuring out whether Anthony Schwartz or Braylon Sanders, and really I'm going with the guy who already knows this offense. I don't know what that timetable for Odell Beckham looks like. I would never feel comfortable playing a guy in a regular season game who hasn't taken a single snap in team drills, even though Teron Armstead's probably taken 12 snaps in team drills. It just doesn't feel right. I think if you want to be smart, keep Odell on the PUP, and that leaves room for Washington. It gives him a month, and as you know, Barry, in this NFL today, in a month we'll have another receiver for IR. So, you know,
true. And you could get by with 5 receivers if Odell's on PUP to start the season. The reason I think you could get by with 5, being obviously Hill, Waddle, Berrios, Ezukanma, Malik Washington, is because Jonnu Smith essentially is going to be your number 3 receiver, and we're going to see A-Chain obviously lined up a lot at receiver. So that's why you can get by with Berrios as your 3, Ezukanma as your 4, I think, early in the season.
Yeah, definitely. Barry, you want to ask us about bubble guys. I think that the number 1 bubble spot happens to be the quarterback position, because I think one of those guys gets fired. And who it's going to be, I have absolutely no idea. For those who don't understand, there are new NFL rules that allow you to elevate your practice squad quarterback and keep him on your roster as your number 3. Now, that would lead to, or we think, most teams keeping only 2 quarterbacks on their 53-man roster. Now, this could be a situation like offensive linemen where teams are like, we got 10, we need 10. We're not letting go a good offensive lineman. That could be the case with quarterbacks. But now here's the point that I want to ask you. In anything that either of you have seen, whether it's a game, a OTA practice, a training camp practice, are any of you convicted that either of these quarterbacks are good?
Isaiah?
No, not exactly. I haven't really been impressed by either of them. I think if we're going to like really break down their games, I think Mike White is a little bit more of a safer bet maybe than Skylar Thompson. But I am a fan of, just the way that I like to watch football, the way that I would control a team if I could. I like someone that's a gunslinger that's willing to take those chances, right? And that, means that the edge is to Skylar, right? So, but if you're gun to my head, are any of these guys good? No, they're not.
Well, a reader sent me a suggestion today, and I got to give him a shout out because I liked his idea. It made me think. He said, what about getting Taylor Heineke from Atlanta? And I know he wasn't good in the preseason game, but he has a history when he played for the Commanders of being solid, of being serviceable. To me, he's been a better NFL quarterback than Mike White if you just take the whole body of NFL work. He's due $1.2 million this season. Yes, Taylor Heineke. So obviously he's behind Kirk Cousins. He's behind Michael Penix. So would you rather have Taylor Heineke at $1.2 million or Mike White at $3.5, knowing that money for White is non-guaranteed? I would look long and hard at Taylor Heineke if the Falcons make him available. To me, it saves you $2.3 million, and to me, he's a better quarterback. Am I nuts, Omar Kelly?
Are the Falcons potentially going to waive Taylor Heineke?
I guess we shall see if they keep 2
or 3. I'm not trading for a quarterback. I'm not. I'm going to wait to see what's available. And I'm really talking about my practice squad quarterback because one of these 2 guys is going to be on my 53. The other is going to be on my practice squad unless he wants to go elsewhere. Here's the complicated dynamics of it. And Barry, you know this because you pay attention to the NFL business. If they can shake you down, they will shake you down. And when you've got Skylar on the books for $2.1 million for the next 2 years,
that's combined.
And Mike White costing you $3.5 million for just this season, it kind of explains why Skylar's being given every possible opportunity to prove that, hey, it should be me. I'm curious to see how they handle this in the exhibition game, but I can honestly tell you, I can't call that competition. I can't call that race.
Yeah, I think it would be really depressing if they approached Mike White about a contract cut from $3.5 million. Because frankly, for a good backup quarterback, $3.5 million is a bargain by today's standards. So if they don't give him second team reps for 2 weeks and they make him play with guys,
$1 million haircut, Barry. $1 million.
And then they ask him to take a pay cut. I mean, what kind of way is this to treat Mike White? Now I know it's NFL business. This is how
did it to Jeff Wilson last year. They do this all the time.
And Mike White is going to go from feeling like a kid in a candy store. We told us last year about how exciting it was to meet Mr. Marino and being in the same room with him to just feeling totally depressed and dispirited. Again, we're speculating about the pay cut, but it would not be surprising if they determine after Friday that these 2 quarterbacks are similar. They'd rather have Mike White, but they would rather have Mike White at $2 million instead of $3.5 million. What does Mike White say? They're probably gambling on Mike White saying, I like it here. I grew up here. My family can watch my games here. I'm comfortable here. I have a home here. Sure, I'll take a $1.5 million haircut. I'm not sure he will. It'll be interesting. Yeah, Isaiah, if you have to go with one, it sounds like you're going with White because he's safer.
No,
but
he said Skylar. He said Skylar.
Yeah, I'm saying Skylar.
White, I know you thought was a safer option.
Yeah. Mike might be the safer option, quote unquote. But with this offense, fireworks are a thing, right? They like to play forcefully. They like the electricity, right? And I would want somebody that is going to fit that mold more. I mean, I've seen enough of Mike White to know like that's not necessarily the guy, right? So, I'm more so Team Skylar if I had to pick.
Okay. I want to talk to you guys about bubble guys. because to me, this is the most interesting thing of an otherwise boring, vanilla, dreadfully dull third week of preseason in the NFL. It's to root for the guys that you've invested interest in as a Dolphins fan. And to me, just as a journalist, the guys that most intrigue me going into Friday are two of the rookie cornerbacks. Dolphins have 3 undrafted rookie corners. I'm looking at 2 in particular, Storm Duck and Isaiah Johnson. Both have had good camps. Storm Duck and Isaiah Johnson have a similar particular statistic. It's a very obscure statistic that they're equal in. I was looking at the Pro Football Focus numbers, passer rating against. We mentioned it with David Long earlier in the show. Both have a 39.6 passer rating against, tied for 5th best among every NFL cornerback who's been targeted at least 5 times. 1 for 9 throwing against Storm Duck by Commanders and Falcons quarterbacks. 0 for 5 against Isaiah Johnson. Duck was the better pro prospect coming in, but you could make the case that Johnson has the more tantalizing NFL body and size at 6'3". I know Omar likes his NFL body. I would lean toward keeping Duck on the 53 and not removing another corner. I would remove a tight end, maybe go with 3 tight ends, or maybe go with 4 running backs, or maybe go with 5 receivers, which you could do if Odell starts on PUP. So I would lean toward Duck on your 53, investing more time in a guy who frankly could have been drafted, and trying to sneak Isaiah Johnson onto your practice squad. I think he'd get there. We're not convinced, but I think he would. So that would be my thinking going into the game, but I want to see obviously how both guys do. So to me, those are the most interesting, as they say in Seinfeld, bubble boys. That would be the most interesting bubble guys going into Friday. Isaiah, the bubble guys that you're most intrigued about watching Friday, what name comes to mind?
So for me, I want to go back to that 3-man tight end race, right? Like who's going to fill in that final spot, right? Because there's been a lot of talk about this offense and how the tight end is not important. The tight end is not important. Well, I think Jonnu Smith kind of put that to bed, right? Like Jonnu Smith I don't think a tight end necessarily, like that designation necessarily even fits him. You know, that's one of the things I talked to him about after the game Saturday. Like you literally lined up everywhere except the traditional tight end spot. And so for me, I want to know, after Smythe, like who is that third guy, right? Is it going to be Tanner? Is it going to be Fortson? Is it going to be Julian Hill? Like that's who I'm looking for, because I think each guy brings a different skill set.
Maybe Hayden Rucci competing a little bit with Tanner Connor or Fortson. I know Rucci's probably more a practice squad guy. His physicality is intriguing to me. I think Hill's definitely your 3. Omar, would you invest a roster spot in Tanner Connor, or I know you're not doing Hayden Rucci. Would you do it with Tanner Connor or Jody Fortson? And Fortson, remember, his claim to fame is 5 years in the NFL with Kansas City, caught 14 passes, 5 of them were touchdowns from Mahomes.
I can't ignore what I saw from Tanner Connor filling in for Jonnu Smith. And if I don't have Jonnu Smith, does that whole playbook go out of the window? No, I need a guy with some unique skill sets, and that's Tanner Connor. So to me, Tanner Connor would be on my 53. Jody Fortson, I just haven't seen any level of consistency. We've got another injury. Are we going to go 4 weeks into the season and you're going to be on our IR? Like, what am I getting here? To me, and to address your Storm Duck worked the starters today and looked like he belonged. As I say to you consistently, Barry, I'm not spending a 53-man roster spot on 3 rookie cornerbacks nobody is going to claim.
Well, just one of them. I don't want all 3. You can move Jason Maitre to the practice squad. He was a guy who wasn't even signed initially.
I am putting all 3 of them on my practice squad. I'm claiming other people's players.
What if I told you, and 2 years from now, you missed out on the next Nik Needham or Cater Kohu with Storm Duck? You can't say it wouldn't happen.
I'll find another one next year, Barry. I'll find another one next year.
Okay.
To me, I'm watching this game, and the one guy that I think is a player who is being slept on the most on this entire roster is Jack Driscoll. I know he's outperforming Lester Cotton. They know he's outperforming Lester Cotton. They have Lester Cotton in there as a starter to save people's feelings, and you know which people I'm talking about, Barry. Let's stop fighting the funk. Show me Jack Driscoll with the starting unit. Let's see what it looks like, and then we can move on from there. Don't pretend that he is not outperforming these other guys. I know he's safe. I want to see him get a legit show. And if I'm Jack Driscoll, I would be mowing people down on Friday. Just absolutely mowing people down, second level blocks, showing them, hey, this is my job here at right guard. We'll see what happens.
I'm totally with you on that. Driscoll had the key block on the Chris Brooks 59-yard run last week. To me, he's every bit as good, if not better, than Lester Cotton. It's time to give him a chance at right guard. But one thing hovering over all of this, and Isaiah, you watched some of the offensive line today, one thing hovering over all of this is not knowing if Aaron Brewer is going to be back for week 1. I know you guys saw him on the side today. He had a bandage around his hand. So if he's back in week 1, then Liam is probably your starting right guard. If he's not back in week 1, then it's either Driscoll or Cotton. How concerned are you by the offensive line, Isaiah?
I mean, very. I think the offensive line is very key because why? You have to keep Tua upright. I mean, we've seen him battle injuries early in his career, right? And I think last year, he was kept upright. And I think that's going to be the biggest thing. As long as Tua is healthy, this team is going to be okay, right? But if the O-line, you got a hole here, a hole there, backups playing there, it's not going to.
That's the Dolphins season for the last 10 years, Barry.
And exactly what has happened over the last 10 years.
Yeah, it's always waiting for the next offensive line catastrophe to happen.
Exactly.
Hopefully, in Butch Barry, we trust Barry. We keep telling that to ourselves. Well, on that note, that is our last of the training camp practice reports. We will be back after the game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. On that note, Isaiah, for Barry, for Omar, and the Miami Herald, we will see you on Saturday.